How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and we have a lot to get into in this late night edition of your first catching it as it drops of a Big Mets update segment, March 14th, 2025. Because not only are we kickstarting today's show by getting into the key takeaways from the Mets games over the past 24 hours, losing against the Red Sox yesterday 3-2, tying against the Cardinals today 3-3, thanks in large part to Juan Soto, the one and only, and his insane spring training. We'll deep dive just how impressive has Soto been this spring. What can we expect from him throughout the course of the 162 for the $800+ million man of total value of a contract? From there, we'll get into his former teammate with the Yanks as well, and Clay Holmes, as who would have thought if you asked a Yanks fan a year ago, fast forward to present day, that Clay Holmes would be the Mets opening day starter with Juan Soto batting the 2-hole. We'll get into why is Clay Holmes the Mets opening day starter? Does that make sense over Senga and others? And what can we expect from Holmes throughout the course of the 162? And speaking of Senga, not only did he have an up-down start at the time of recording this that we'll get into, but furthermore, what is the latest on his health status? Not only for guys like Senga, but also for guys like WardyNYM, who spoke to the media recently, and also Jose Butto, we have a key update on. And that bullpen's important because Ryan Stanek, who looked very good in his scoreless outing yesterday, has a new pitch in that arsenal, and we're going to shout out our great friend Isaac Rothman furthermore to finding that out and exactly what it means for Stanek and that arsenal. So much to get into, such little time, so smash a like and subscribe on as your first chime in. It's greatly appreciated. Help us get to our next subscriber goal of 33,000 subscribers, at which we will be giving another Mets jersey away once we have hit that subscriber milestone. We've been doing jersey giveaways the past 3K subs. When we hit 30K, we did a Juan Soto jersey. 31K, we did a Juan Soto Mets shirt jersey. And then for 32K, of course, the winner asked for a Juan Soto Royal Blue jersey, which was really nice. So regardless of what player it is, anyone on the active roster, once we hit 33K, we will do another one. But folks, without further ado, let's get into it by first getting into the key takeaways from yesterday and today's game. And obviously, when we saw the Mets performance yesterday against the Red Sox losing 3-2, there were some notable things, not too much obviously on both the offensive and pitching front, but David Pearson gave the Mets 3.2 innings that we saw, including 3 hits and just 1 earned run allowed, with 2 walks, who has a sub-1 ERA, a sub-9 ERA even, .9 ERA rather, this spring training, so not complaining there. Edwin Diaz we saw fluctuate heavily with the velocity, which had a lot of fans wondering, is Edwin having more of a sweeper in that mix and not a true slider because it's not as hard? Honestly, from the shape and everything that I saw and from Isaac Rothman, our great pitching contributor, talking about it on X yesterday, he came to the conclusion that no, it doesn't really look like there's anything changing with the slider. It was just down in velocity. And no, it's not something that I personally would be overly concerned with right now because it's the hardest spring training. We've seen velo go down with Edwin. We've seen it fluctuate in recent years. This isn't overly shocking. This would be greater cause for concern as if this continues into the first month plus of the season and he's just simply can't get that bite back on that slider like he used to, because when it's right, again, he's sitting high 80s on that pitch, and whereas he was sitting more so in the low to mid 80s that we saw in his outing for the Mets yesterday, in which again he gave us a scoreless outing but was a little erratic in doing so as he had to throw 18 pitches in just that one inning. Ryan Stanek was very notable, that we will get into shortly as to what's most standing out on that new pitch in his arsenal, but Genesis Cabrera gave the Mets a nice scoreless inning, which I love because Genesis is actively competing with Danny Young for that final lefty bullpen spot, not named AJ Minter right now, especially in low leverage situations. I think Cabrera has more upside, but I can see why the Mets still like Danny Young, not only with his solid start to spring training, but as well as the upside they gave the Mets in both high and low leverage last year, and was pretty much thrown into things right away. And Huascar Braziban was thrown into things right away last year too, coming from the Miami Marlins via trade, and he gave the Mets 1.2 scoreless innings in yesterday's outing, including 2 walks, a hit allowed, and 4 strikeouts, and a 1 unearned run allowed. But Braziban, who did get 4 punchies, who is very lively, that we see with the heater, that can easily touch in the high 90s and has some solid off speed and break there. Braziban, a guy to keep an eye on, because regardless on if he cracks the Mets bullpen to begin the year or not, he's absolutely going to have a heavy factor in Mets pen throughout the course of the 162. But guys, from yesterday's game to today's game as well, where the Mets tied 3-3, it was most notable when we looked on the pitching outing for Kodai Senga, who fluctuated, that we'll get into. And on the offensive front, you know, there weren't too many standouts, but there is one man that continues just pure dominance, and that is obviously the one and only. Guys, let's break it down and get into Mr. Juan Soto. And I actually apologize, everybody. Let me get right here for a second. The Juan Soto, the one and only story continues, as he was 2 for 3 in today's game against the Cardinals at the time of recording this, including 1 home run, 2 RBIs, a 417 average, and a basically 1,500 OPS so far this spring. Not only did Soto have a towering shot on what was a full count, in which imagine thinking you're going to win a full count against Juan Soto in spring training. Not going to happen, buddy. And then you see Juan drive in Francisco Lindor there that we saw center right after Lindor got the party started that inning later on, which was awesome to see. And Juan Soto shutting up all the Yankee fandom on other haters out there saying, oh, he can't play defense. And he makes a nice casual sliding grab there that we saw in right field. So Juan Soto, who made it known to everyone in the media so far this year that he wants to win a Gold Glove more than a batting title because he's won everything. He just wants to prove his defensive upside and to shut the haters up. And I love Soto for that. And if he can go out and at least be competent in right field, that's all I could simply ask as a fan. But the reason why we're having another spotlight on Juan Soto is because the man is absolutely insane. Every single time you think that Juan Soto might dial it back a little bit, he just continues to get better. I mean, the thought of Juan Soto potentially having his best years with the Mets versus anything he's done previously in his career, including the World Series run as a teenager in 2019 with the Nationals, including the Padres runs, including going all the way to the dance but falling short, not because of lack of effort on his end for the New York Yankees. Juan Soto at the young, exciting age of 26 is absolutely destined to not only be hopefully anywhere from a 6 to 8 WAR player again this year, but a guy that's going to not only change the complete dimension of this lineup, but take this team to another level. We saw the Mets come out with their first part 1 of a 2-part documentary on the Mets official YouTube channel on the so-called pursuit, going after Juan Soto. Great doc. Highly implore you guys to check it out whenever you get a chance. And it shows you that if the Mets are going out of their way to make a multi-part documentary about a signing, clearly it's for a good reason. Clearly he is the largest contract in North American sports history for a reason. And the fact that he's a New York Met feels illegal. I'm waiting for someone to tell me that I need to wake up from this amazing dream. But the reality is that by the time I wake up from this amazing dream, my son is going to be 16 years of age, and I'm going to be who knows what and who knows where by that point. But Juan Soto, the one and only, continuing his complete dominance so far this spring training. And I think it's safe to say no matter who's out there, a minor league pitcher, a starter, he's going to take you deep. No problemo. The way that he did against Sonny Gray, against these same Cardinals just a couple days ago, in which I was in attendance for that game there, that we saw live from Jupiter, Florida during my spring training trip, in which I just got back from. A little sad that I'm back, but at the same time, it's bittersweet because baseball season is getting close, baby, which you love to see, and I cannot wait to see what Juan Soto is going to do for this amazing team in 2025. And you want to know who I'm also really excited about, not only just on the offensive front for the Mets, including guys like Francisco Lindor, who did, of course, get the party started with a double today that we saw, which was eventually driven in by Soto. We also saw guys like Mark Vientos get in on the hit parade, among others, too. So there's definitely notables there, and Brett Beatty had himself a double, too, if I'm not mistaken, or at least a solid hit opposite field. So we're definitely seeing the offense be sporadic, but in a better way so far this spring, because we're seeing more of our key starters out there. And when we talk about starters, we have to talk about the pitching. And we have to really get into how Clay Holmes is officially the Mets' Game 1 opening day starter there in Houston against those Astros. One, I like it. It makes sense on the matchup alone against a team he has a lot of familiarity with for both good and bad reasons, that being in Houston. But I think Clay Holmes' stat line, along with these ridiculous 8 Ks across 3.2 innings or so against the Nationals a couple days ago, is completely indicative on what you're getting. I was at this game. It was tremendous to see Clay Holmes carve it up in person with the sink piece touching the high 90s, with that new kick change working the beauty, with the sweeper doing the thing. There's so much to love about the 4 to 5 pitch mix now. That is Clay Holmes. And Clay gets the Game 1 start now. And it does make a level of sense, especially when you get into what we saw from Senga today that we're going to transition into shortly. But Clay, who's given the Mets roughly 10 scoreless innings so far this spring training, a man who prided himself on making sure that he was with this Mets team pretty much a month before anyone else was, and Port St. Lucie spring training, because he wanted to ramp up. He wanted to make sure that he was as locked in and ready to go for the season as a true starter for the first time since 2018 with the Pittsburgh Pirates. And now a man who only has 4 career starts on his belt is going to be the opening day starter for the first time in his career. And I think the first time in Mets history that they're having an opening day starter be a reliever turned starter in this fashion. I don't think Seth Lugo has been an opening day starter at any point for the Mets, because during that peak prime for Lugo with the Mets, I think was also a lot of great years with Jacob deGrom. So unless I'm mistaken there, I believe this is the first of its kind, and Clay absolutely deserves it. I was caught off guard by this, truthfully, and I don't really know why. I just didn't expect Clay to be the number one. I thought to begin the year is going to be one of Kodai Senga, David Peterson. Obviously, Sean Manaea would have made a lot of sense before he went down with injury, but it's good to know that he's starting to ramp up back from his oblique strain. That's a very important thing. Great step in the right direction. But in the case of Clay, obviously the spring numbers have proved themselves, but the Mets have to be really, really happy with what they've seen so far from Clay Holmes. The eye test shows it. The numbers show it when you look through all the advanced numbers on how his pitches grade out. What 100 being the base level, above 100 being above league average, and below 100 being below league average. And Holmes has been nasty all spring long. I mean, this outing was just absurd. Outside the fact that he walked like 3 or 4 guys this game, including like a leadoff walk to begin things, he locked in, he got in a groove, and these Nats fans were fanning left, right, and center. And hopefully something that will be a commonality throughout the course of the 162 as Clay Holmes goes up against plenty of these key rivals in the NL East. But shout out to Clay. Congratulations again on being named the Mets 2025 opening day starter rather. And I would love to hear from you Mets fans if you agree or disagree with Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns on that decision, and how do you expect the rest of the rotation to pan out? Do you think it's going to be Peterson or Senga as a 2, and then flip-flopping the other 1, and then taking on from there with the Cannings, the McGills, the Blackburns of the world, who have all looked very sharp over their past spring outings, especially Griffin Canning, who I think was the most notable of the bunch, but both McGill and Blackburn were absolutely nails in their respective outings too, which I was in attendance for all those games, which I'm very happy to say. But now, guys, as we continue to break down these key takeaways that we saw, not only with guys like Clay Holmes, who's officially announced as the Mets opening day starter, Juan Soto too, but now let's have that further discussion here on Kodai Senga, because we saw Kodai, get beat up a little bit. Granted, it's a spring game, and granted, it really only means so much, right? Kodai Senga went 3.1 innings for the Mets in their 3-3 tie and gave up a total of 7 hits and 2 earned runs, 0 walks, which is good to see, but obviously was hanging some pitches there in Kodai. So as we go and do a little bit of a pitch breakdown on him through Baseball Savant, what Savant tells us is that his 4-seam was topping out at 95 and was sitting 93, 94, a couple digits down from the norm, but again, he's ramping up, obviously, coming back from injury. I know he pitched in the playoffs for us, but he was still ramped up fast then when he wasn't 100%, obviously. And then you look at the sweeper, which utilizes second most in his arsenal, sitting right around 80 to tops 84. The forkball, the ghost fork that we love to call it, sitting 82 to 83. The cutter there was sitting right around 90, 91. The slide piece was sitting right around 81, 82. And the curveball that we saw was at 63.5. And hilariously enough, the curveball is the only Kodai Senga related highlight I have for you guys to show. And the reason why I'm showing it is because it was 63.5 miles per hour. And when Kodai Senga was asked post-game today about this pitch, he said, "I don't want to talk about it." So clearly, Kodai didn't mean to necessarily throw that pitch as soft as he did, but he did. And I don't know if this was more one of those things because of spring training, he's just dabbling, or it kind of just slipped out the hand the way it did. I think it's more of the latter than anything else. That's why he jokingly said, I don't want to talk about it. But that was an interesting pitch to say the least. And again, more than anything, Kodai was just kind of getting barreled a decent amount today, and that's going to happen in spring training, especially for him who's trying to get ramped up. But I think it's notable when we talk about someone Kodai Senga and where things stand for him and his health status. This is a following quote that I think you guys should all hear and see, so bear with me.
まあ自分の今の現状だったり、操れること操れないことっていうのは自分で把握できているから、そこに対してあと2週間でフォーカスして仕上げていけたらなと思ってます。
Yeah, I have a growing understanding of where my body is and what I can and cannot do at this point. And so within the next 2 weeks, I hope to fix those and hit opening day.
So the quote, and I understand there might be something a little missed in translation, so I'll bear that in mind. But still, I have a growing understanding of where my body is and what I can and cannot do at this point. Within the next 2 weeks, I hope to fix those and hit opening day. Now, what exactly does Kodai need to fix? We all know that Kodai is very meticulous about his mechanics and his arsenal. This is not only a commonality with Japanese pitchers that we've seen in recent years in the MPB, but especially for Kodai, who pitched a decades-long worth of innings, as a starter. each year he was out there a lot of innings, and he had a lot of wear and tear already on that UCL to a degree, which is exactly why when the Mets signed Kodai Senga, they have a clause in their deal that says, this contract will only go this far depending on if these amount of innings are hit, because they're wary of the partial tearage, of the current status of that UCL. And thankfully, knocking on wood, that has not been an issue for Kodai, but rather it's been what we saw a little bit with the other parts of the mechanics in his initial injury, as well as I think it was initially the shoulder last year or so, and then obviously the calf injury when he came back against the Atlanta Braves. But Kodai is still trying to get himself in a proper regimen. I saw him pitch in person there in the backfields when I was just at Mets spring training a couple days ago. Gave up a tank to Drew Gilbert, but then was getting in a groove, and he was attacking batters really well that we saw against people in the Mets farm and within the organization. But Kodai, I think there's still enough of uncertainty with him that even if he has a solid outing next time around, the Mets are going to play it very precautious and very safe with him. I fully expect him to begin the year in the Mets rotation, but I think there's a reality that because of Kodai especially, the Mets are going to play things smart, and it could still increase the likelihood of there being a six-man to start the year. Now, after we heard Frankie Montas went down, we still heard from Carlos Mendoza that a six-man was staying. After Sean Manaea went down, that's where he kind of contradicted himself, and if I'm not mistaken, said, that things may change now. We'll have to see. Well, if Kodai is going to have a slow roll, I'd imagine that the Mets will probably like the idea of having a six-man to start that way, which would mean all of Griffin Canning, Tyler McGill, and Paul Blackburn having a taste in the rotation. Now, is it a guarantee to happen? No, it's not, but I think it's just food for thought for us Mets fans to bear in mind for Kodai Senga, who I think we're all ecstatic to see back in this rotation, but we're also wondering what Kodai Senga are we exactly getting here in 2025? Obviously, he isn't getting any younger, has elite stuff, but we know the velocity's fluctuated. We know when it comes to his comfortability, it's kind of fluctuated a bit too on the health front. So it's going to be really indicative over the next week and a half, 2 weeks to see how Kodai is looking to get a greater grasp as to where he's going to slot in this rotation and how much of an immediate impact he's going to have for this team. Because I think it goes without saying, Kodai is easily one of the most important players, if not the most important for them in a lot of ways for the rotation. I won't say most important, because if the Mets can do what they did last year with Kodai missing all of one regular season game for the most part, I think that they can handle anything thrown their way. We've seen this team face adversity. You just got to hope that they've already went through a good run of it, and there shouldn't be much more of it until we get through really the heart and the thick of it in the 162. But again, knocking on wood, that's wishful thinking as a Mets fan. But to talk more on Kodai Senga, let's hear from Mets skipper and Carlos Mendoza.
Carlos, with what he last year, can you kind of put into context how important this season is to Senga and how important he is, peak Senga would be to this team?
Yeah, we know what it means to this team and to this rotation. I think everyone saw it in 2023, and that's what we're looking for here, to have a healthy Senga. If he's healthy, he's an ace. So, we need that. We're going to need him. And right now, everything is trending on the right direction. I think he's in a really good place mentally, physically. And something that I didn't see last year. There's that smile on his face, that joy, being around the players. Last year, he went down early in camp, and he was just rehabbing and trying to play catch up the whole year. So I think it's really good to see the way he's carrying himself in that locker room right now. His presence, knowing that he's healthy, everybody will feel it.
Carlos.
So there's many talking about the importance of Kodai Senga, obviously, in 2025. And when I think of importance, I don't only think of the rotation. Obviously, it's a vital thing for this team. But the same thing can be said about this Mets bullpen. And the great thing about this bullpen, at least heading into 2025, is that it really feels that on paper, the Mets have an abundance of riches of guys that'll probably not start the year in the bullpen, but will absolutely eat innings for them throughout the course of the 162, and will probably be pretty solid in doing so. And there's one guy that blossomed for the Mets and said pen last year. No, it's not just Daniel Nunez, and no, it's not just guys like Jose Budo. We have to refer to guys like Reed Garrett, who's looking to have another strong year for the Mets, this time as a mainstay. And he was absolutely gassed tonight, as our guy Pitch Profiler does a fantastic job with individual pitching breakdowns and X for you. A 40% whiff rate that we saw, 4 pitches, over 100 pro stuff plus. Yeah, that'll play. That was awesome to see. So he was 5% above league average on the sinker that we saw in his latest outing. He was almost 20% above league average on the cutter, which is great to see. The splitter, 17% above league average, and the sweeper, 12%. That is all fantastic. As we know, Reed Garrett is continuing to deviate more away from that four-seam fastball that's been a meatball, but you got the sink piece and you got the cutter in. That is going to be a recipe for success. That's a 4-pitch mix that'll play pretty much against any kind of matchup and low and high leverage situations. So Reed Garrett, love to see that, and hopefully we see more of that not only this spring training, but obviously throughout the course of the season here. And let's also get into, there's the amazing Clay Holmes graphic I meant to show you guys earlier. Shout out to Jacob, my awesome editor here on the platform. He knows exactly who he is. What a beauty he is. Also, shout out to Louis Terrence, too, that we saw throughout a runner earlier in the Mets game against the Cardinals. Never going to complain about that. We do have, however, a breakdown that I got to show you guys on Ryan Stanek. And my guy, Isaac Rothman, who joined me live in person after the Mets game. I think that was a game that Griffin Canning pitched a couple days ago, live in person there in PSL. Well, we got Isaac back here with another great breakdown from yesterday on how Ryan Stanek has a new sweeper, everybody. So all my bullpen fanatics, to all my Ryan Stanek truthers, lock in and get ready, because as it was confirmed from MLB Pitch Class here on X, this gives him a 4+ pitches. It has above average velocity for a sweeper, and from his high slot, it will appear as a unique shape to batters. So per TJ stats here that we see here on if it's above league average or not on the Stuff Plus, we see he was just above league average on the 4-seam in his past outing, 11% on the sweeper. So already 11% above league average on a pitch he just added to his arsenal. That's sick. The splitter, 14% above league average, and the slider, 11% above league average. So you have the slider, which is obviously going to be harder and sharper, and that sweeper, which is going to naturally have more horizontal movement, but the way that he has a high release point as well makes it a bit more deceptive for those batters. So another piece added to the weapon of an arsenal that's already exciting as is there, and Ryan Stanek, that's never a bad thing. That's never anything to complain about. So now, guys, let's continue to break down the latest in Mets land, because I do have some other key notes for each and every one of you, especially when we get onto the health status of some guys. As you can see from Anthony Como, Jose Butto hasn't appeared in Grapefruit League games the past week due to a minor groin issue. He's feeling well enough to throw a bullpen session today. However, the Mets don't consider this a major thing. So good news is that it's nothing major. Bad news is Jose Butto is dealing with a bit of an ailment to start the year. So Butto, who I think a lot of us felt was a lock to begin the year in the bullpen, you do have to wonder at least slightly what his stats will be to begin the season as a guy who, if I'm not mistaken, still has at least a minor league option left. But don't quote me to that because I don't have it in front of me at the moment. But Butto feels like a guy that's got to at least have one left, but also a guy that I don't want to see out of this bullpen either, unless health is the only reason as to why. And speaking of health, nowhere farther to look than here with Brandon Nimmo, as Brandon Nimmo, with that right knee soreness, says he should be ready at least to DH on opening day, but he's not sure if he's prepared to play the outfield. He said he's pretty much at 80%, so he keeps fluctuating with these percentages, Brandon Nimmo, on his health, among other things. But what does this reaffirm to me? With the Mets going to have 2 open roster spots now, one can be utility / second base, the other can be outfield. Now, I personally would love the idea of both Acuna and Beatty cracking this roster and battling it out from there, but if it's only going to be one of the two, Alexander Canario, if he continues to get reps of spring training, the Mets have to maximize the opportunity for him now, especially with the continued health uncertainty of someone like Nimmo. Winker can handle left field fine, but I think it goes without saying that the Mets brought in Canario for a reason, and while he hasn't really done much for the Mets so far this spring, they have to make a decision sooner rather than later as to what they're doing there. Give him more reps or part ways with him entirely and see if someone else maybe is a better fit there as a potential backup outfield option. So Nimmo, I'm happy to see that's nothing too serious when it comes to the knee, but I think it goes without saying that he's going to probably be dealing with some nagging things naturally throughout the course of the year. Not that I wish it, I'm just saying don't be shocked if you see it happen. This is something that we've seen in the past couple years with Nimmo, really since he signed his new deal, unfortunately. And when it comes to the feet, the knees, and other things, for a guy who plays the game as hard and as well as he does, Nimmo, naturally the body's going to come back to bite you every now and then. That appears to be the case. Also, what appears to be the case, which really was eye-popping to me, and shout out to my guy Mets Muse on X, a good buddy of mine. He tweeted yesterday, lowest, so this is a day out, but it's still relevant because it still holds true of the Mets. Lowest team year raise this spring, the Mets number 1 there at the time at 3.29. Now that has changed since because Senga gave up 2 runs today, and there was 1 more run given up by the pen, but still the Mets have been top dogs so far this spring throughout the first couple weeks there. I think that's important. I think that's a further testament to the great pitching lab that the Mets have built over the past 4.5 years. But everybody, that is about going to do it for our latest Mets Big Mets Updates segment. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. If you did, please let us know all your big takeaways in the comments down below out of everything that we highlight, from the bullpen to the rotation to the offense with guys like Juan Soto, among others. Be on the lookout, as we will have more Mets content for you guys every single day, all spring training, regular season, and off-season long. As always, no matter what, let's go Mets, baby. Peace out.